Welcome back to the table. Today, Emily and I are taking a look at the next one from Gamelin Games in the Tiny Epic series. This one is Tiny Epic Vikings.
Yar!
Oh boy. She got so into the game when we played it, she broke her arm doing
That's how, exactly.
No, but she is dedicated, and we're both here to talk about our experience playing this and tell you a little bit about the game. Like any Tiny Epic game, though, this one does what all of them do. It delivers more game than you'd expect.
Definitely.
In a little box.
Yes.
And this game actually had us thinking quite a bit when we played it.
Oh, definitely. A lot of complex decision making you're making in this one.
Yeah, but the turn structure is pretty straightforward, but there's a lot of things to juggle in your head when you're making the decisions you make. So what we have here, just as a reminder, this is a prototype. We can tell you for sure that a lot of the wooden pieces are going to be very different. If I have photos of those, I'll be putting them up right now, but you can also check out their campaign to see them. But the minis and everything that they have, or the meeples, are really, really cool looking in this. They're sort of like screen printed and things like that. The artwork may change, but I think a lot of what we have here is probably close to final, but just keep in mind it's a prototype. And what we have here is, of course, this main board. And not every Tiny Epic game is built the same, but this one has this sort of area control board.
Yes.
Because, like a Viking game probably should have, is a little bit of area control. And a fair amount of fighting over the things that are going on this board. And then, just at the top and bottom of the board are favor cards. This is yet another thing that we're going to be fighting over. Not just the land on the board, but these favor cards. And what favor? Well, the favor of these gods. Now, the game comes with a few different ones. Yes. You choose 3 at the beginning of any game and put them out there. And these we have here is Njord. Is that how you pronounce it? Njord, Frigg, and Freya.
There you go.
And these are going to come into play because these are going to basically determine or help determine the point value of the things you're going to be fighting for.
Yes. Yeah.
And we're going to be fighting for these runes and these land masses and these runes on these favor cards. And then we've got the Viking cards right there.
Yes. So the other thing is that it's a lot of area control, but it's also a lot of drafting. So in the start of every round, what we're going to do is we're going to start with cards, and we're going to draft them. We're each going to pick one and then pass. Pick one and pass. And we'll just keep going until
we do that until we have, well, in the first round, 4 cards. It's going to be played over 3 rounds, and in round 2, you do a little bit more, 5, and in round 3, you do 6 cards. So it's a pretty quick game in that respect, but that thinking is going to take a little bit of time, because you're making some significant thoughts when you draft these cards. Because when you draft these cards, and I'll show you one of them here, this is Bodil, you're going to see a few different things. In the upper left-hand corner is a rune. This is going to come into play with other powers that you're going to get to basically bring into effect when you play additional cards. Then you have effectively the combat value of this. Yes, it's strength. This is only going to come into play when you're fighting amongst each other, and we'll get to that in a second. And then below that, you have the basic action of the card. And these do a number of things. This one right here is going to give you resources. And in this game, that's going to be steel, food, or wood, or something to that effect. The wood you're going to be using to build things like boats and settlements. The food you're going to be using to feed your settlers that you're going to get out on the board.
And then steel you're going to use when you're raiding villages.
Yes, like any good Viking should do.
They can sometimes help power up strength. So sometimes the strength for a battle needs more steel as well.
And then this is kind of the interesting thing here, and this is what brings us back to this rune on the card. The very bottom is the rune action. So when you play a card, you're going to take the basic action, but you might also be able to take the rune action depending...
If you play your cards right.
Depending on what cards you have. So this one would be a blue rune. So if I played a future card during a round that needed the blue rune in my player area, this would qualify. Or if we've acquired the right colored runes from the board itself and have those in our supply, those can also help that. Because some of these abilities require like 3, maybe even 4 runes
some of them are expensive,
to fire
but
off.
Good.
Very good. So that's what one of these cards looks like. The god cards you're going to see are effectively point values for their relative runes. So we've got Njord is going to be this orange rune, and then pink for Frigg, and Freya's the blue one. So as we do things in the game, these values are going to go up.
It's relative, right? So it's the one who has the most value. So
yes.
Orange might be at 9, pink might be at 10, and blue might be at 20. It doesn't matter that blue's that far ahead. It just matters that it is first place. So that those points are going to get slightly more points for any runes you have dealing with Freya, the blue goddess.
Yeah, and so these runes are going to be bouncing around the table the entire game. So if I take this pink rune, I'm going to have it maybe for a little while, and I might use it to sort of power some of those rune abilities while I play cards. But if that value of the pink runes are going up...
I might say, you know what, I'm about to steal that. Let's go sail to that island, get some of my settlers out there and say, David, I have more presents now, and
exactly.
it is mine.
And the interesting thing there is it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because as more and more of that happens over a specific type of rune, that fury value for that god is going to go up, putting it potentially in first place, making those runes more valuable at the end of the game.
Right.
So we'll talk about the rest of the components as we explain the round structure. Like Emily just said, we start with a draft phase. And like we said, we just draft the cards. Once you have all of the cards you're going to use for the round, you go on to the action phase. And in player order, you're going to play a card down in front of you. And eventually, through the end of the round, you're going to have all your cards played out in front of you. Now, again, to that decision making, when you play your card, you can play it for a couple different reasons or in a couple different ways. I already alluded to one of them. You can play it face up and just simply take the basic action and then potentially that rune action. Now, what are some of those basic actions? Some of the actions are going to be able to get settlers out, move boats around this area in the water. You can bring boats into docks, and if the dock has a village, you might be able to then, as a free action, spend some of that resource steel to raid that village. Right. If you're at a dock, you also can freely put people or settlers on that, but you have to have food to do that.
You do.
So you're going to be doing all of these sorts of actions to manipulate the board, to basically get more cards played, hopefully, because you want to get the right cards played in front of you so that that last card you can play, you can really do that nice, juicy rune action at the end. So that's effectively one way to play it. Or you can start or join a battle.
Yes, so if you join a battle, you're going to place your card face down, so no one can see what the strength is. Well, you know what it is. And then, as we go around the board, people can decide to join the battle with you. If a battle hasn't been started yet, you're the one who's starting it. And when you start a battle, you can choose any of the 4 different favor tiles, whichever one you like best. The nice thing about these favor tiles is some of them have multiple runes on them, so there's going to be a lot of victory points at the end. But they, at the bottom, also have different resources that they're going to give you immediately if you win them.
And those resources are probably one of the unsung heroes of the game here.
Yes.
As we played our first game, there's not a lot of these resource cards that you can play may not come into your hand.
Yeah.
You do want to look for those, but if they don't happen to come in your hand, you might want to start a battle. So like Emily said, you play the card face down, and then you get to choose one of these outside edge cards as the favorite card that we're fighting for. We put this over here on the era mat, and that's what we're fighting for. And like she said, the rest of the table can either join the battle by placing a card face down, or they can just take their turn as normal, play their card face up. I don't care about that.
And that's fine, because even if David says, you know, I don't care about that, I don't want to be in the battle, I still have someone to battle against. I'm just going to battle against the just generic invaders.
Yeah, there's an invader that just gets flipped off the top of the deck. You don't know what the strength is going to be.
Correct.
So it might be stronger than you, it might be weaker than you.
And they do have a deck that's going to start building over time. So by the end of the game, they can be significantly stronger than they were at the beginning, especially if nobody's been battling with you. It's been the invader each time.
Right. So if there are other players that join the battle, once it gets back around to the person who started that battle, you're going to all simultaneously flip your cards and simply compare the strength value of your card. Now, the strength value can be as straightforward as it's 10.
Straight 10.
End of story. Or it might be a value that's higher than that, but you have to spend a little steel or some resources in some way, shape, or form to get that strength. And then there are some even still that might be a variable of the runes that you currently have.
Or the supplies that you currently have.
Yeah, or the supplies that you currently have, which is really kind of interesting because if you have a battle card that looks fairly moderate, but it benefits from all of the pink runes you have, it's going to count the pink runes you've collected from the board, and it's going to also include the pink runes of the other cards that you currently have played for the actions of your turn. So you could really build up a really strong card that way and take someone by surprise. Because everyone's seen the cards, or most people have seen the cards during the draft.
Sure, right.
But it is hard to
It's hard to remember. There's a lot going on.
You can't remember all of those things.
But it's good, too, because even if if I win the battle, it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to take that card that was up for grabs.
Yeah.
This is going to be face down now for me in one of my 3 spots. I can only keep 3 of these by the end of the game. So if I ever get a 4th, I'm going to have to choose one to bump out. And it's face down, so the rest of the game can't see it. But I can look at it any time and see, like, okay, this was for, the 2 blue gods. So I'm really going to want to try to be boosting up the blue god throughout the game so that these are really worth the most points. And then I'll take the resources. But even if I lost, I wouldn't get this card.
Yeah.
Instead, what I get to do is I get to look at whoever I played. So in this case, I played someone from the pink, so Frigg. And she is going to get mad that I lost for us. But so her fury goes up 1, which makes her more valuable.
Yeah.
And I get to take her bonus. So each of these have their own different thing that they're going to let you do, but some of them are really powerful. Like hers was, you get to just flip over another card and do that action and the bonus action with no cost. Like, it's pretty much a whole nother turn that she's giving me.
Yeah, exactly.
From losing.
This is where I think one of the more interesting things about the game, because this introduces that concept of not always winning isn't a horrible thing. And in fact, you may even take some actions where you're like, you know what, I have a card here where I don't really need the action. Right. So yeah, I'll join the battle, but I'm thinking I might lose. And in fact, I might want to lose because if I'm losing with this pink rune Viking, and I know I'm going to be able to take that action, I might end up with better
things going on.
Or you
might be saying, I want to make sure that the pink god gets more fury so that they're more valuable at the end.
Yeah, so you're effectively sacrificing those Vikings in a way to Valhalla.
Yes.
And getting the Valhalla bonus from those gods, which is kind of a really cool dynamic there. So that's how you're going to be doing that. Now, you notice these cards have the runes, and we've already talked about the runes out here on the board. Those are going to be your 2 different types of points.
Yep.
And it's sort of back to the simplicity of a tiny epic game. The end of the game is going to have those runes on the cards and those runes that you've collected score separately. So, as you can see right here on the era card, the runes that you've collected from the board, whoever has the most fury, their runes are going to be worth 6.
Yep.
Then 5, then 4. Then you do the cards separately. So you're going to flip over all of your favorite cards. And again, remember, you only have 3 of them. And those are going to score 4, 3, or 2. Again, based on the fury of those gods.
Yep.
But they're just basically those 2 different scoring mechanisms.
And that's it.
And whoever has the most points wins. It's a lot of decision making and a lot of thought in terms of how you're playing those cards. Because honestly, I can't even communicate to you the puzzle when you're drafting those cards.
Very multi-use. You have very many options on what you can do with them.
Yeah, and we've both played a lot of drafting games. And when we started playing, and I think the first draft, we were like, okay, it went pretty quick.
Yeah, it's kind of nice that it ramps for you like that, where you start with 4, so you're not super overwhelmed.
But by the second draft, we were like, well, wait a minute here. And because you're thinking, how can I chain these cards out so that, I have this one that requires 2 pink runes. So optimally, to take that action, that rune action, I'm going to want to get 2 other pink runes played. Or if I have a rune, maybe I just need to get 1 other pink rune played by the time I play this to take that additional rune action. And some of those rune actions are really cool. Some of them are fairly straightforward. They let you kind of manage your resources or maybe do some of the actions out on the board, like moving a settler across these little lines here to go to other lands. Effectively, the area control is handled just as simply as everything else in this game. If you enter an area, you're going to, if you have more people than anyone else there, they're all going to lose a person. So their settlers come back to their mat. But then you simply have that territory for the time being.
Right.
Until someone else does the same thing to you and comes in there with more strength. Now, the strength there is determined by a few things. The settlers are worth 1.
Yep.
The boats, if they're in a dock on a landmass,
on that island,
they're worth 2. And then if you've built these, I don't know if they're citadels or settlements.
Temples. Yep.
Temples, thank you. Those are worth 3.
4. They're worth 4.
Worth 4. So these are not easy to build. The first one costs you 5 wood, and the second one costs you 7 wood.
And you can only get 7 total wood in the game.
The resources can be pretty tight. I found in our game, my first draft didn't have many resource cards.
Yeah.
So I was pretty resource poor. There was not much I could do, but we both start with a boat out on the board. So we can move that boat, And, if you put one settler on a piece of land and you're the only one there, you have that rune. So you can start getting that engine working to get more out of your cards.
Yeah.
But in the second draft, I was looking for those resource cards.
You really were. You were like, I'm going to take them.
And I probably did it a little too much, but I took one that had, gave me 4 and another one that gave me 4. And when you take resources like that, you're able to take any combination of the 3 resources.
Right.
So I took 4 divided up amongst the 3, depending on what I wanted to do, because wood, like I said, is going to be what you use to build those boats and build those temples.
And there's a tiny bit of engine too, because once you build a boat, you get an additional food every time you take the harvest action. Or once you build a temple, you get an additional any resource every time you do the harvest action. So if you're building a bunch, then you're getting a bunch when you're harvesting. You're no longer resource poor, but you have fewer actions to take then.
Yes, you do. And you have to also remember, once you get your settlers all out on the board, you're not completely out of settlers. So if you ever want to take a boat to a dock and then spend food to put settlers on that land, you first take settlers off your board, but then you can freely take settlers back from there to your mat and then put them. So you're basically redistributing your settlers at that point. So that's an important thing to keep in mind, because late in the game, that is exactly what you're going to be doing.
Yeah.
The board is going to be covered with settlers out here, and probably fewer villages. One thing we haven't discussed is the reason why you would want to raid a village is when you do, you're going to take it and hold it beside your player board. From that point forward, at the end of any action that you take, you can dedicate a village to one of the gods, or just do sort of more generic dedication, where you're placing the village token at the end of your turn on one of these 4 spaces on the air mat to basically take more actions. This top one lets you move a settler out on the map. This second one lets you move your boat. And the boat movement
is big.
It's big. It opens up a lot of things. That's how you get more settlers on the board. It's how you raid more villages. The next one is to get resources, and the last one is to build. When you dedicate it to a god, though, you're going to place it here, and that just adds 2 to their fury. So you're able to sort of pay tribute to that god.
Which can be really nice at the end, because if you got those villages, and then at the end you're like, Frigg is not where I need her to be. I want her to be first. I have a lot of pink stuff.
Which happened in our game.
Yeah, then you just start dedicating villages to her, and all of a sudden she's just moving up a little bit more than any of the others.
Yeah, the game can go back and forth quite a bit. A lot changed in our last round, and you only play this over 3 rounds. And the rounds are pretty short. 4 cards, 5 cards, 6 cards.
Very efficient.
So a lot of things can change, and then you just add up the points and see who won. So that is Tiny Epic Vikings. Like I said, it's a lot of game in a little box. You'd be really surprised at how much thinking you're going to be doing in terms of the decision making when you're playing these cards. And the puzzle of playing these cards out, I think, is something that sort of pushes my buttons for sure.
Yeah, and I think for me, one of the things I liked was really these Valhalla bonuses, right? Where there's a lot of variability in this. The 3 we picked were super cool, where at the end, I had that one turn where I actually wanted to lose a battle.
Yeah.
Because his bonus was going to get to sail so many things at once.
But she won.
But I won, which was not what I wanted to happen.
Yeah, because she initiated the battle, but ended up having to flip an invader because I wasn't in the battle.
Right, and the invader just happened to be very weak, which was not what I was going for.
It wasn't what she was going for, and it would have probably made the difference in our game, which was kind of fun and exciting. But yeah, those bonuses are interesting, because I always like a game where there's sort of consolation, and in this case, the consolation can actually be
I wouldn't even say it's consolation.
Yeah.
I would say you could even have strategy around battling a lot just to take those bonus actions, because they're quite powerful.
Yeah, I would agree.
Which I think, again, puts it at another level of decision making, right? What you're thinking through and how you want to play it.
Yeah, so if you have any questions at all and you haven't checked out their campaign yet, you can feel free to make them in the comments below, and we'll try to answer what we can. But until next time, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then. Now, before you go, there's one more thing I want to talk about. I hate to bring this up, but YouTube Analytics tells us to do this. So please, click on the subscription button, ring the bell, watch our next video, rinse and repeat. Just keep doing that over and over and over and over.